Vecthora stood before the massive holographic display in the Bounty Guild Hall, studying the newest contract with eyes that could see heat signatures through solid walls. The Kresh Hunter's reputation preceded him across 70 star systems. 200 successful hunts, 0 failures, and a name that made even the most dangerous criminals surrender without a fight. The Guildmaster, a nervous Telvanni with trembling tentacles, placed the data chip on the counter. "This one should be simple for someone of your caliber," the Guildmaster said, his voice carrying the subtle vibration of fear that Vecthora had learned to recognize in dozens of species. A human cargo pilot accused of corporate espionage. Vecthora's clawed hand picked up the chip with surprising delicacy for a creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall. His scales, dark as the void between stars, shifted in the dim light of the guild hall. The chip slotted into his wrist computer, and the target's information appeared. Information flooded his vision. Sarah Chen, human female, age 32, cargo pilot for Nexus Corporation. Last seen near the Outer Rim Trading Station, Kepler 7. Vecthora studied the image of his prey. A small creature, barely reaching 1.5 meters in height, with soft skin that looked like it would tear at the slightest pressure. Her brown eyes stared back at him from the hologram, showing nothing of interest. No fangs, no claws, no natural armor, no enhanced senses that he could detect from her biological scan. "What did she steal?" Vecthora asked, though he rarely cared about the why, only the where. "Corporate research data, extremely valuable," the Guildmaster replied quickly. "Nexus Corporation wants her alive for questioning, but they're willing to accept proof of termination if capture proves impossible." Vecthora's inner jaw clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. Humans were Category 4 on the Galactic Threat Scale. Assessment: barely above the domesticated puffins that children kept as pets. He had hunted Draxian war chiefs who could bend steel with their bare hands, Nurax assassins who could turn invisible, and Garlon berserkers who felt no pain. This human would be the easiest bounty he had ever collected. "The payment?" Vecthora rumbled. 50,000 credits plus expenses, was the reply. It was a modest sum for his services, but the job seemed simple enough. Vecthora accepted the contract with a claw press on the datapad. His ship, the Silent Tooth, was already being prepped in the docking bay. Within the hour, he would be in slipspace, tracking his prey. The journey to Kepler 7 took 3 days. During that time, Vecthora did what he always did. He studied his prey. The ship's database contained extensive files on humans, and he absorbed every detail with the focus of a creature bred for hunting. Humans were weak, the files confirmed. Spacefaring species. Their skin provided no protection against claws, energy weapons, or environmental hazards. They couldn't see in the dark, couldn't hear high-frequency sounds, couldn't smell chemical traces that most predators use for tracking. They had no venom, no natural weapons, no regenerative abilities. Their only advantage seemed to be endurance. They could run for long periods without stopping, though they were slow compared to proper hunters. And they had something the files called problem-solving abilities, though Vecthora dismissed this as typical human arrogance. Every species thought itself clever. Kepler 7 appeared on his view screen, a rotating cylinder of metal and carbon fiber suspended in the darkness of space. The trading station serviced cargo haulers, smugglers, and those who preferred to avoid the more regulated ports of the core worlds. It was the perfect place for a fugitive to hide. Vecthora docked without incident and stepped into the station's main concourse. The artificial gravity felt slightly lighter than he preferred, but his enhanced muscles adjusted instantly. The air carried the mixed scents of 100 species: oil, ozone, exotic foods, and fear. He activated his tracking suite. The Nexus Corporation had provided Sarah Chen's last known biometric signature. His sensors immediately picked up trace DNA markers in the station's air filtration system. She was here, or had been within the last 12 hours. The hunt had begun. Vecthora moved through the crowded corridors with predatory grace. Other beings gave him a wide berth. The Kresh were known throughout the galaxy, and their presence usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. His sensors led him deeper into the station, past the commercial districts, and into the industrial sections where cargo was loaded and unloaded. The trail grew stronger. He was close. A cargo bay door stood partially open, and his sensors indicated elevated human presence. Stress hormones in the immediate area. Vecthora's lips curled back, revealing rows of crystalline teeth. He moved silently, despite his size, a lifetime of hunting, making stealth as natural as breathing. Inside the cargo bay, containers were stacked in neat rows, creating dozens of hiding spots. His thermal vision cut through the containers like they were glass. And there, behind a stack of supply crates, was the distinctive heat signature of a human. Vecthora stepped into the bay, his claws scraping against the metal floor deliberately. He wanted her to know he was here, to feel the fear that made prey panic and make mistakes. Sarah Chen, his voice resonated through the cargo bay, deep enough to rattle the containers. You are wanted by Nexus Corporation. I am Vecthora of Kresh. Come out and this will be quick and painless. Run, and I will enjoy the chase before I claim my bounty. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he heard it. A soft sound, like cloth brushing against. The heat signature moved, but not toward him. Instead, it disappeared. Vecthora's eyes narrowed. He strode forward quickly, rounding the containers where she had been hiding. A maintenance hatch in the floor was closing, its pneumatic seals hissing. He grabbed the edge before it could fully seal, and wrenched it open with casual strength. Below was a dark tunnel, part of the station's service network. His prey had fled into the maintenance system. Vecthora's chest rumbled with something between annoyance and satisfaction. So the human wanted to make this interesting. That was acceptable. He had time, and the station was sealed. There was nowhere she could go that he couldn't follow. He dropped into the tunnel, his night vision activating automatically. The narrow passage was clearly designed for smaller species, but he could manage. He began tracking again, following the scent of fear sweat and the subtle heat traces left by a fleeing body. The hunt was on. Vecthora had never lost a hunt. Not once. Not ever. The maintenance tunnels of Kepler-7 were a maze of pipes, conduits, and access corridors that snaked through every level of the station. Vecthora moved through them with methodical precision, his sensors sweeping constantly for any trace of his prey. The human's trail was easy to follow. Too easy, perhaps, but he dismissed the thought. Humans were not known for their cunning in evading trained hunters. Sarah Chen's heart hammered in her chest as she crawled through a vertical shaft, her hands slick with sweat that made the ladder rungs treacherous. She could hear the hunter behind her, distant, but approaching with terrifying consistency. Every scrape of claws on metal, every rumbling breath that echoed through the tunnels reminded her that she was being stalked by something designed to kill. She had known this was coming. The moment she had copied those files, the moment she had seen what Nexus Corporation was really doing with their research funds, she had known they would send someone. But she had hoped for corporate security, maybe a bounty hunter she could reason with or bribe. What had arrived instead was a living nightmare from the species that the galaxy whispered about in fearful tones. Sarah reached a junction and paused, forcing herself to think. Her hands were shaking, her breath coming in short gasps, but panic would kill her faster than the hunter. She had spent 3 years hauling cargo through dangerous space, and she had learned one crucial lesson. When you can't fight and you can't run, you adapt. She looked at the junction carefully. 3 tunnels branched off in different directions, but only one led toward the hydroponics bay, the station's life support center, full of steam, water systems, and places to hide. She chose that path and moved as quietly as she could manage. Vecthora emerged from the vertical shaft minutes later. His sensors immediately detected the thermal traces at the junction. The human had stopped here, probably trying to decide which way to go. His analytical mind assessed the options. She was heading toward hydroponics. Interesting choice. Perhaps she hoped the heat from the growing systems would confuse his sensors. He was not concerned. The hydroponics bay was enormous, a 2-level cathedral of green where the station grew its fresh food. Rows of crops stretched in every direction under artificial sunlight. Steam rose from irrigation systems, creating patches of mist that drifted through the aisles. Sarah crouched behind a row of tomato plants, her mind racing. She had maybe 5 minutes before the hunter arrived. She used them well. When Vecthora entered the hydroponics bay, his first sensation was the oppressive humidity. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of growing things, neither of which bothered him particularly. His thermal vision showed dozens of heat sources, the crops, the heating elements, the water systems. But there, near the center of the bay, was a human-sized signature. He moved forward carefully now. The hydroponics bay had good sight lines, but also good hiding spots. He would not underestimate prey in its chosen terrain, even prey as weak as a human. The heat signature moved, darting between rows of crops. Vecthora accelerated, his powerful legs closing the distance in seconds. He rounded a corner and steam erupted from a broken pipe directly in front of him. Scalding water vapor filled the aisle, and while it didn't hurt him through his scales, it completely whited out his thermal vision. He snarled and switched to standard vision, but the steam was too thick. Something moved to his left. He spun, claws extended, but found only a motion-activated sprinkler system that Sarah had triggered remotely using a maintenance panel. By the time the steam cleared, she was gone again. Vecthora stood still, his head tilted slightly. This was unexpected. The human was using the environment against him, turning her knowledge of the station into a weapon. That showed more intelligence than he had anticipated, but intelligence alone would not save her. He recalibrated his approach, using multiple sensor modes simultaneously. Sarah had gained a few minutes, nothing more. He began moving through the hydroponics bay more systematically, checking each row, each hiding spot. His pace was slower, but more thorough. Sarah watched him from inside an air vent 2 levels above her, chest heaving as she tried to quiet her breathing. She had bought herself time, but not much. The hunter was learning, adapting. She could see it in how he moved now, more carefully, checking angles she might exploit. She needed to get out of hydroponics. The station master's office was 3 levels up. If she could reach it, she might be able to access the security systems, maybe even seal sections of the station to slow the hunter down. But that meant crossing through the main commercial district. And she couldn't do that while Vecthora was this close. So she waited, watching, learning. Vecthora completed his sweep of the hydroponics bay and confirmed what he suspected. The human had escaped again through the ventilation system. He examined the grate she had removed and calculated quickly. She was small enough to use the vents as a highway through the station, while he was far too large to follow. This was becoming irritating. No hunt had ever taken this long. He had tracked Garlon berserkers through their home jungles, caught Nurax assassins who could blend with shadows, defeated creatures that should have killed him a dozen times over. Yet this small, weak human was evading him through nothing but environmental knowledge and desperation. Vecthora's pride stung. He activated his communicator and contacted the station master. "I require assistance," he said, the words bitter in his mouth. "Seal all external docking ports and lock down the main airlocks. Ships leave this station until I have my bounty." The station master, aware of what happened to those who refused a Kresh hunter, complied immediately. Within minutes, Kepler 7 was on lockdown. Automated announcements echoed through the corridors, informing all residents and visitors, that the station was temporarily sealed due to security protocols. Sarah heard the announcement while crawling through a vent near the commercial district. Her blood ran cold. The hunter had just eliminated her only escape route. She was trapped in a sealed station with a predator that had never failed a hunt. But something else flickered in her mind alongside the fear. Anger. Nexus Corporation had tried to bury evidence of illegal weapons development, weapons that violated 3 major galactic treaties. Now they had sent this hunter to silence her, and he was willing to lock down an entire station just to collect his payment. She was tired of running, tired of being prey. Direction in the vent. Crawling toward the old storage sections of the station. The areas that hadn't been updated in decades, where the maintenance systems were old enough to be hackable, where she might have one advantage: time to prepare. Vecthora stood in the center of the hydroponics bay, his sensors sweeping the station's layout. The human had gone to ground somewhere, but it didn't matter. She was trapped, scared, and running out of places to hide. He had all the time in the galaxy. He would find her. Eventually, all prey made a mistake, and when she did, he would be there. Vecthora had begun documenting the hunt. Recording hunts was common practice among the creche, a way to teach younger hunters the art of tracking and killing. This hunt, however unusual, would serve as an educational example of persistence and methodical tracking. He spoke into his wrist recorder as he moved through the station's corridors. "Hour 16 of pursuit," he rumbled, his voice steady and professional. The human prey continues to evade through environmental manipulation and knowledge of station infrastructure. This demonstrates that even weak species can prolong a hunt when operating on familiar terrain. However, the outcome remains inevitable. He was approaching the old storage section now, following a trail that was almost too obvious. The human had left traces, a disturbed dust pattern here, a handprint on a wall panel there. Either she was getting sloppy from exhaustion, or she wanted him to find her. Vecthora's instincts suggested the latter. Interesting. Cornered prey sometimes turned to face their hunters, though it rarely ended well for them. He proceeded carefully, his claws extended, his sensors active. The old storage section was a graveyard of forgotten equipment. Massive containers lined the walls, stacked 3 high, covered in decades of dust. The lighting was poor, with half the panels flickering or dead. It was exactly the kind of place a desperate human might make a final stand. Vecthora entered the main chamber and immediately noted the strategic problems. The space was large and open, with limited cover for someone his size. But for a human, there were dozens of hiding spots between and behind the containers. His thermal sensors swept the area. Nothing. No heat signature, no movement. Then the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in dim red. Vecthora's vision adjusted instantly, but something had changed. The air felt different, heavier. Took a step forward, and his foot hit a tripwire. A container above him shifted, and its contents, hundreds of ball bearings, cascaded down. He dove aside, the small metal spheres bouncing harmlessly off his scales, but scattering across the floor. Now every step would make noise, eliminating his stealth advantage. "Clever," Vecthora acknowledged aloud. "Thank you," a voice called from somewhere in the darkness. Sarah's voice, tight with fear, but defiant. "I've had a lot of motivation to get creative." Vecthora's head swiveled, trying to pinpoint the source. The voice had echoed off the containers, making it impossible to locate precisely. "You cannot win this," Vecthora stated simply. "I have tracked prey across hostile worlds for 2 centuries. You have extended this hunt longer than most, but it ends the same way. They all do." There was a pause. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice coming from a different location. She was moving. "Why do you hunt?" she asked. "Is it just the money?" Vecthora considered not answering. Prey did not deserve explanations. But something about the question intrigued him. Perhaps it was the genuine curiosity in her tone. Or perhaps he was simply bored enough to indulge in conversation. "It is nature," he replied, moving carefully across the ball-bearing covered floor. "The Kresh are predators. We hunt because it is what we are. The money is simply how civilized society compensates us for doing what we would do anyway. It gives us purpose, structure, pride." "Pride in being a tool?" Sarah's voice held an edge now. "Someone points you at a target, and you just go?" "No questions asked." "The questions are irrelevant," Vecthora said, though he felt a flicker of something uncomfortable at her words. "The contract is what matters. Once accepted, it must be fulfilled. This is the code." "What if I told you the contract is based on a lie?" Sarah called out. "What if I told you I didn't steal anything? I discovered something. Nexus Corporation is developing weapons that violate the Kessara Accords. They're planning to sell them to the highest bidder, including groups that will use them against civilian populations. I didn't steal research data. I copied evidence of war crimes." Vecthora paused. His analytical mind processed her words. Prey often lied when cornered, saying anything to buy more time. But something in her voice suggested truth, or at least belief in what she was saying. "Show me," he demanded. A datapad skittered across the floor, sliding on ball bearings until it stopped near his feet. Vecthora picked it up, his eyes scanning the display, scanning the contents. His wrist computer verified the encryption. These were genuine Nexus Corporation files. The schematics showed weapon systems designed to maximize suffering, to cause maximum damage to biological targets, while leaving infrastructure intact. Population control weapons, the kind banned by every civilized government in the galaxy. The contract details were there too. Nexus had marked Sarah as a data thief, but their internal communications told a different story. They knew she had evidence. They knew what she had found, and they wanted her silenced permanently. Vecthora's jaw clenched. The corporation had lied to the guild, had lied to him. He was not hunting a thief, he was hunting a witness, someone trying to expose genuine evil. But did that matter? "The contract stands," Vecthora said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "What Nexus Corporation does is not my concern. My reputation depends on completing contracts, not judging the morality." "Behind them. So you're just going to hand me over to be killed?" Sarah stepped into view now, emerging from behind a container. She was small, disheveled, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes blazed with something fiercer than fear. "You'll let them bury this evidence, and let them sell these weapons, because your pride won't let you admit you were used?" The words hit harder than they should have. Used Vecthora had never considered himself as being used. He was a hunter, a professional, someone who provided a service. But looking at the data, seeing how Nexus had manipulated the guild, manipulated him, it felt less like accepting a contract, and more like being a weapon pointed at an innocent target. "I do not care about your morality," Vecthora growled, but the conviction was hollow. "Then care about your own," Sarah shot back. "The Kresh are supposed to be honorable hunters, right? Where's the honor in killing someone for exposing war crimes? Where's the honor in being a corporation's cleanup tool?" Vecthora was silent. For the first time in his long career, he felt genuine uncertainty. The hunt had been clear, simple: find the target, collect the bounty. But Sarah Chen had done something no prey had ever done before. She had made him question not just the hunt, but himself. "I will give you 12 hours, Vecthora said finally. "Not out of mercy, but because I need to consider what you have shown me. After that, I will make my decision." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "You're giving me time?" "Consider it a sporting chance," Vecthora replied. "Use it wisely. In 12 hours, I will either complete my contract or void it. But make no mistake, if I hunt you again, I will not hesitate. He turned and walked away, the ball bearings crunching under his feet. Sarah stood frozen, watching the massive predator leave. She had expected to die in this storage room. Instead, she had gained something. Precious time. And perhaps impossibly, she had planted doubt in the mind of the galaxy's most feared hunter. Vectora returned to his ship, the datapad still clutched in his hand. He sat in his command chair and stared at the evidence. Sarah had shown him 12 hours. He had given himself 12 hours to decide what kind of hunter he truly wanted to be. The one who followed contracts blindly, or the one who chose what was worth hunting. Vectora sat in the darkness of his ship, reviewing the datapad for the third time. The evidence was damning, detailed, and absolutely genuine. Nexus Corporation had violated multiple galactic treaties, and they were using him to eliminate the one person who could expose them. He could still complete the contract. Nothing in the Kresh Code forbade hunting witnesses or innocents. The code only demanded that once a contract was accepted, it be fulfilled. His reputation, his pride, his entire identity as a hunter rested on that perfect record. But something gnawed at him. He accessed the station's security system, a simple matter of overriding the outdated encryption, and found Sarah on the cameras. She was in the engineering section, surrounded by tools and components, working with frantic energy. She hadn't slept, hadn't rested. She was building something, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite her obvious exhaustion. Vectora watched, fascinated. Not the behavior of prey waiting to die. This was something else. Determination, refusal to surrender, a kind of strength that had nothing to do with muscles or claws. Hours passed. Sarah worked. Her eyes were red from fatigue, her movements slower but no less focused. Twice she stopped to drink water, once to eat a ration bar, but she never stopped completely. She was a creature driven by pure will, by the absolute refusal to give up. Vectora found himself studying her the way he studied prey, but with a different purpose. He was trying to understand what made her continue, what fuel drove humans when their bodies should have collapsed from stress and fear. The answer came to him slowly, uncomfortably. Humans were endurance hunters on their homeworld, persistence predators who ran their prey to exhaustion over days. They didn't quit because quitting meant death, and evolution had carved that lesson into their very DNA. Sarah wasn't strong, wasn't fast, wasn't dangerous, would not stop. That was a kind of strength Vectora had never truly appreciated before. His contemplation was interrupted by an alert on his sensors. A ship was approaching the station, broadcasting Nexus Corporation identification codes. Vectora's eyes narrowed. He accessed the communication channel and listened. The ship was carrying corporate security forces. Their orders were clear: terminate Sarah Chen, retrieve the data she had stolen, and if possible, eliminate the Kresh hunter who now knew too much about their operations. Vectora's lips curled back in a snarl. So Nexus had decided he was a loose end, something to be disposed of once he served his purpose. The insult cut deeper than any claw could. They had used him, lied to him, and now planned to discard him like a broken tool. The decision crystallized in that moment. Vectora stood and armed himself, checking weapons he hadn't needed for the hunt. His pride had been wounded, but more than that, his sense of self. He was not a tool. He was not disposable. He was Vectora of Kresh, and no corporation would tell him when his hunt was finished. He left his ship and moved through the station toward engineering. The Nexus forces would dock in 20 minutes. Sarah needed to know what was coming. Sarah looked up from her work as the massive shadow fell across her workstation. Vectora stood in the doorway, weapons visible on his harness. Her hand moved instinctively toward a plasma cutter, but he raised a clawed hand. "Peace," he said, the word strange coming from him. "We have a larger problem. Nexus Corporation has sent mercenaries to kill us both." Sarah's face went pale. "Both of us?" "I know too much," Vecthora explained. "They cannot allow either of us to leave this station alive. They arrive in 19 minutes. Sarah's mind raced. "How many?" 12 soldiers, standard corporate security equipment. They are trained but not exceptional. "Fight 12 soldiers." Vecthora's chest rumbled with dark amusement. "Easily. But they will not come all at once, and this station has many places for ambush. If we are separated, they will overwhelm us through numbers and coordination." Sarah stared at him, understanding dawning. "You're suggesting we work together?" "I am suggesting that I find the idea of being disposed of deeply offensive," Vecthora corrected. "And you have information that should be made public. What you do after we survive is your concern, but I will not allow Nexus Corporation to dictate when my hunt ends." Sarah studied the massive predator, looking for any sign of deception, but his eyes, those alien, unreadable eyes, held something she recognized. Wounded pride, yes, but also a kind of integrity. He had been used, and that violation mattered to him more than the contract money. "Okay," Sarah said, "but I have conditions. We do this my way. Strategic thinking over brute force. Them enough to survive. No killing unless absolutely necessary." Vecthora considered this. Mercy was not typically part of his hunts, but these were not prey. They were obstacles, and obstacles could be neutralized without death. "Acceptable," he agreed. "What is your plan?" Sarah smiled grimly. "You're the weapons, the perfect predator, unstoppable in combat. But they'll expect that. They'll have protocols for fighting Kresh hunters. What they won't expect is you following human tactics." For the next 18 minutes, Sarah outlined her strategy. Vecthora listened, his respect for her intelligence growing. She thought in layers, in contingencies and ways to turn the environment against their enemies. It was not the straightforward approach of a warrior, but the calculated planning of someone who had survived by being smarter than her problems. When the Nexus ship docked, Sarah and Vecthora were ready. The corporate soldiers entered the station with military precision. Precision, weapons ready, formations tight. Their leader gave orders through encrypted channels, directing teams to secure the engineering section and the docking bays. They expected resistance from a desperate woman, and possibly an irritated hunter. What they found was a nightmare. The first team entered a corridor that Sarah had depressurized. Their suits protected them, but the sudden atmosphere loss scattered their formation. Vecthora dropped from a ceiling vent, moving with terrifying speed. He disarmed 3 soldiers in as many seconds, his strength making their weapons toys in his hands. Sarah's voice crackled in his ear, guiding him to the next position. The second team tried to flank through the maintenance tunnels. Sarah had rigged the tunnels with chemical fire suppressant foam that hardened on contact, trapping them in place. Vecthora disabled them before they could cut free. The third and fourth teams regrouped, calling for backup. Not a coordinated defense. Their commander was shouting orders, trying to understand how a cargo pilot and a lone hunter were defeating trained soldiers. Sarah monitored everything from the security station, her fingers flying across multiple consoles. She rerouted power, sealed doors, vented sections, turning the entire station into a weapon. Vecthora was her blade, and she wielded him with precision that surprised even him. The final confrontation came in the main cargo bay. The remaining soldiers had fortified a position, using their ship as cover. Their commander stepped forward, a hardened veteran with cold eyes. "Surrender the data and the woman, and we'll let you leave," he called to Vecthora. "We have no quarrel with you." Vecthora emerged from cover, Sarah beside him. The soldiers' weapons tracked them both, but didn't fire yet. "You presume to give me orders?" Vecthora's voice was a low growl. "You presume to decide when my hunt ends? I am Vecthora of Kresh. I do not take commands from corporate mercenaries." The commander's face hardened. Then you die with her. No. Sarah's voice rang out clear and strong. You're going to stand down, because every word you've spoken has been recorded and transmitted to the Galactic Council, along with all the evidence of Nexus Corporation's weapons program. Your ship is locked down, and station security forces are on their way. It was a bluff, mostly, but the commander hesitated just long enough. Vecthora moved. The fight was brief and brutal. He was designed for combat in ways humans could never be. And these soldiers, for all their training, were not prepared for a Kresh hunter who fought with human tactical planning. When it ended, the soldiers were disarmed and restrained, and Sarah was uploading the evidence to every news network she could access. Vecthora stood beside her, breathing hard, feeling something strange and unfamiliar. Decide prey, trusted prey, learned from prey, and somehow, impossibly, he felt more like himself than he had in years. The station was damaged but functional. Emergency crews worked to restore the sections that had been depressurized during the fight. Nexus Corporation soldiers sat in makeshift holding cells, waiting for Galactic Council peacekeepers to arrive. Sarah sat in the engineering bay, exhausted beyond measure, watching the news feeds as her evidence spread across the galaxy. Vecthora found her there, his massive frame filling the doorway. He carried 2 containers of nutrient paste, the best food the station had to offer, and set one beside her. You should eat, he said. Your body requires fuel. Sarah took the container with shaking hands. Thank you. She ate slowly, her mind still processing everything that had happened. To you, I mean, you voided your contract. The guild won't be happy. Vecthora settled onto the floor, his scales scraping against metal. My reputation will suffer significantly. The Kresh value perfection in hunting. I have broken my perfect record. Because you chose not to kill an innocent person, Sarah pointed out, that seems like it should count for something. To humans, perhaps, Vecthora rumbled. To my people, a broken contract is a broken contract. The reason matters less than the result. I will likely be stripped of my Master Hunter status, possibly exiled from the guild. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry, I never wanted. Do not apologize, Vecthora interrupted. I made my choice. I could have completed the contract at any point. I chose not to, because you made me see something I had spent 2 centuries ignoring. What's that? Vecthora was quiet for a long moment. That being the best hunter means more than never failing. It means choosing what is worth hunting. Nexus Corporation pointed me at you like a weapon, and I followed, because that is what I always did. But you, he paused, searching for words, you made me understand that humans are dangerous, not because of strength, but because you make others think. You question, you challenge, you refuse to accept simple answers. Even when you were my prey, you were teaching me. Sarah managed a tired smile. I was mostly just terrified and improvising. That improvisation nearly defeated me, Vecthora admitted. You turned every weakness into strategy, used your small size to access areas I could not, your knowledge of the station to set traps, your persistence to outlast my expectations. You did not win through strength. You won by making me choose to lose. And that, his voice held something like wonder, that is the most dangerous thing I have ever encountered. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, eating their terrible food and watching the news. Feeds, Nexus Corporation stock was plummeting. The Galactic Council had issued warrants. Multiple governments were launching investigations. Sarah's evidence had done exactly what she hoped. Expose the truth to a galaxy that could no longer ignore it. What will you do now? Vecthora asked. Sarah considered. Testify, probably. Spend months in depositions and trials. Make sure Nexus can't wriggle out of this. She looked at him. What about you? I do not know, Vecthora admitted. I have been a hunter my entire adult life. Without the guild, without contracts, I am... He struggled with the concept. Undefined. Sarah's mind turned the problem over, the way it always did when faced with a challenge. You know, I'm going to need protection, corporate retaliation, other people who want to silence me. There's going to be a target on my back for a long time. Vecthora's head tilted. You are offering me employment? Partnership, Sarah corrected. I need someone who can handle the physical threats I bring, the investigative skills, the ability to find evidence and expose corruption. You bring, well, everything you are. Together, we could make a difference. Real difference, not just this one case. Vectora considered this. A new kind of hunt, one where the prey was corruption itself, where success meant exposing truth rather than collecting bounties. It was so different from everything he had known, yet it felt right, in a way his old life never quite had. There would be no guild oversight, he said slowly, no formal contracts, no guaranteed payment. There would be purpose, Sarah countered, and you'd be choosing your hunts, not having them chosen for you. Doesn't that matter? It did matter, more than Vectora wanted to admit. For 2 centuries, he had followed the guild's direction, accepted whatever contracts paid the best, never questioned the targets. Only now did he realize how much of his life had been lived according to other people's rules. I accept your partnership, Vectora said formally, but I have one condition. Name it. You teach me this human way of thinking, the strategic planning, the use of environment, the persistence. I have hunted for 200 years, but you showed me I have been doing it incorrectly. I wish to learn. Sarah laughed, the sound bright in the dim engineering bay. Deal, and maybe you can teach me not to be quite so terrified of everything all the time. Fear kept you alive, Vectora pointed out. It made you careful, made you think. I do not believe you need to lose it, only channel it better. Over the following weeks, the story of the hunter and the human spread through the galaxy. The news networks couldn't get enough of it. Vectora of Kresh, the perfect hunter, with 2 centuries of success, who had voided a contract to protect a witness. The Kresh Guild was furious, as expected. They stripped him of his titles and declared him rogue. The galaxy saw something different. They saw a hunter who had chosen honor over reputation. They saw a human who had survived through nothing but intelligence and will. And they saw a partnership that shouldn't work. Predator and prey, working together. Sarah and Vectora left Kepler-7 in a repaired cargo ship, heading toward the core worlds where Sarah would testify. But it was only the beginning. They had work to do, corruption to expose, people to protect from those who would silence them. Vectora stood at the ship's controls, his clawed hands surprisingly gentle on the navigation console. Sarah worked beside him, reviewing case files and evidence trails. They moved together with the ease of long practice, despite knowing each other for mere weeks. I have been thinking, Vectora said as they entered slipspace, about what I said during the hunt, that humans are weak. We are weak, Sarah replied without looking up. Physically anyway, compared to most species, we're fragile. No, Vectora corrected. I was wrong. Humans are not strong despite your weaknesses. You are strong because you turn everything, even weakness, into strategy. You make others underestimate you, then you use that underestimation as a weapon. I did not lose to a human. I learned from one. Sarah finally looked up, meeting those alien eyes that had once terrified her. And that made you a better hunter? That made me a better hunter than I ever was before, Vectora confirmed. The old Vectora never questioned, never adapted, never chose. He simply hunted. The new Vectora, he paused, considering. The new Vectora hunts what matters. Sarah smiled. Then I guess we both won. No, Vectora's chest rumbled with what might have been laughter. We both survived. And for a human and a Kresh to both survive an encounter, to work together afterward, that is not winning. That is something the galaxy has never seen before. That evolution, Vectora said simply. The galaxy is changing, and we are part of that change. I thought I was hunting you, but the entire time you were hunting something far more dangerous. The assumption that things must stay as they always were. The ship sailed through slipspace, carrying two unlikely partners toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Kepler-7 faded into the distance, just another station in the vast darkness. Ahead, the core worlds waited, along with trials, dangers, and work that would take years. But Sarah and Vectora faced it together, the human who refused to quit, and the hunter who learned to choose. And in a galaxy full of predators and prey, they had become something entirely new. Equals. Vectora updated his personal log one final time, recording the conclusion of the hunt that had changed everything. This is Vectora, formerly of the Kresh Guild, recording final entry on the Sarah Chen contract. I did not complete the contract. I chose instead to protect the target and expose those who would use hunters as disposable tools. My reputation is destroyed among my people, but I have gained something more valuable. Purpose that I chose, not purpose that was assigned. The hunt continues, but now I hunt what I believe deserves to be hunted. And I hunt alongside a partner who taught me that the most dangerous predators in the galaxy are not those with the sharpest claws, but those with the strongest will. The humans understand something the rest of us forgot, that weakness can be strength, that surrender can be strategy, and that sometimes the greatest victory is choosing not to fight at all, but to change the rules of the fight itself. I am still learning, but for the first time in 2 centuries, I am learning by choice. That makes all the difference. End log. Sarah glanced over as he finished. Feeling philosophical? Feeling alive, Vectora replied. For the first time in a very long time, together, they sailed toward the future they had chosen for themselves.